State Senator, 7th District Republican, Frank Wagner. Senator Wagner, good to have you back, sir.
Good morning, John. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. A little bit early out here. My clock says 5:10, so we had to get up. We had to get up at 2 a.m. today to get out here, but we're doing fine. Found the coffee. That's the main thing. Now, the senator.
Yes.
Let's get right to this Gary McCullom incident. I guess fudging or lying about, I guess you could say, or not knowing what his service record is. We've been covering it all day. We just had Scott Taylor on. Scott Taylor called this, Senator, stolen valor. That's pretty strong words. Now, everybody knows Frank Wagner's military history. You were a deep-sea diver. Is it possible that somebody could be discharged and still think they're a major in the Army Reserves during a war?
Well, you're going to have to ask a lot of folks. I find it very hard to believe that that's the case. I don't know how someone could receive discharge papers and not know they're discharged from the military. So, you know, it's a tough subject. I mean, he's gone on and either intentionally or unintentionally misled the public status in the reserves and in a military town. I think a lot of folks are going to be offended by that.
Now, Senator, in the last forum that you had, Gary McCullom, your challenger, was very aggressive, pointing some things out. Obviously, you didn't have this information, but, I mean, as you look at the campaign now, do you think when you're not being honest about your military status, do you think this becomes now an issue of character and integrity?
Well, I certainly think the voters will take a look at that, and I can't think it wouldn't definitely become an issue of character and integrity. I'm going to have a lot of issues, and a lot of folks in my district are going to agree with me, but, every vote you make up there, there's going to be some folks that disagree with the vote, and I understand that, but I think the district has been with me long enough to know that when I tell them that's what I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to do, and that integrity issue is really what I hear from a lot of folks. That's what they want to know about. They want to know, are you honest with them? And, over the years, I think, I have an excellent track record of being honest with folks. And to be honest, there's probably a couple of votes in 24 years I made that I even regret making. But, I'm always straightforward with people and tell them where I sit on the issues and move forward. And I think this is going to bring into character. Obviously, he doesn't have a voting record. Obviously, he never has held public office. But I think it's certainly going to bring into question everything else he says during this campaign. Is that really what you mean, or is that like your Army Reserve record?
Well, I think that's the question, because now you have to, anything he says you have to question. Now, to his credit, I did have an opportunity to meet with him a few months back, had lunch with him. By the way, we were there for about 45 minutes. I asked him one question. He talked for 45 minutes nonstop and called me Steve. So I don't know, maybe I changed my name, but that's just, it is what it is. But he did tell me about his background and how he grew up in public housing, and they actually gave me the address of where he lived in Richmond, and I actually went there. So the guy's got a story to tell. There's no question. I just don't know, when you got all this going on, why you would not be honest about your service record. And as Scott Taylor said, especially when you got people dying out there on the field, I'm dumbfounded by it. And then the fact that they took 5 hours to respond to the question, that's the other issue, that it's a little inside baseball. But if somebody questions me about something and I don't know what it is, I'm going to start asking immediately, what are you talking about? If you know, on the other hand, you've embellished something, then you got to spend the 5 hours to figure out how to craft a spin, right?
Yeah, let me just say this, John. every person has a story to tell about their lives. Some people born into very wealthy families. Some people are born into very poor families, and certainly there's nothing to discredit that. I mean, my dad died when I was 6 months old. I was raised by a single mom, for 5 years. It's not something I feel like I need to tell everybody all the time. My military service record, it is what it is, but it's not something that I run out and have to inform everybody and tell everybody about. Certainly, I mean, it's on my campaign literature. You have a right to know. The voters should know my bio. They should understand something about the people that elect. But I don't want to distract from the people that are actually out there on the tip of the spear, the people that are actually in the military. I mean, it's a massive organization that backs up a few people that are actually, putting weapons on top of people's heads. They're out there in the field, putting their lives on the line. I mean, those are the people that are, in my mind, the real heroes, and I think we all should recognize that and respect what they do, not distract from that. So certainly, my history, and when I tell that history, but it's not the major theme of my campaign, and shouldn't be the major theme of my campaign. It's when you're incumbent, it's what you've done, and I'm very proud of the track record of my accomplishments in the General Assembly. And then it should be about what you're going to do, and where are your issues, where do you stand, what are the issues that are important to you. I mean, that's what this election is about. It's not about your military history. It's not about that, but the integrity is a key part of the overall campaign. It's not only what are you going to do, but can I believe that is what you're going to do? And and I think that's what voters are about, and they want to know that. They want to know where you stand, and I think that's a major part of any campaign. And so, in terms of that, certainly we tell them, went to the Naval Academy, what's your educational background? What'd you do? I was in the Navy, obviously. What'd you do in the Navy? We tell them what's in the Navy. Then we start talking about what are the issues, and move forward on that, because this is not a backwards-looking office. This is, you're running for office. It's okay. Here's where Virginia is today. Where would you like to see Virginia 4 years from now? And that's what this is about. And you take that message to the voters, and the voters choose.
Let's get to some things that are coming up on the Senate agenda right now, Senator. Yesterday, Terry McCullom reassigning, or I guess reappointing, if you will, Judge Roush to the Virginia Supreme Court. Immediately, your Majority Leader, Tommy Norment, and House Speaker Bill Howe blasted it. Roush seems pretty qualified. And Dave Albo, who's the House Judiciary Chairman, recommended her. Why don't you guys just go with Roush? Well,
we have many candidates, and the candidates that, if you will, the Republican-sponsored candidate is extremely well qualified in his own right. Appellate court judge, of extremely well qualified African-American gentleman, and he forgets that it's the General Assembly that makes the judges, that elects judges. That's in the Constitution of Virginia. And it's not the governor. The governor will make an interim appointment when we're not in session. The fact that he chose to do this brings in the whole constitutional question now of are we in session or not in session, because the Senate Democrats went out of session without agreement from the House, and the Constitution's very clear that both chambers got to agree to adjourn, what we call sine die. It means adjourn. It's not an adjournment where we meet the following day, and now that's here we are doing this, and I think it's consistent with the pattern that we've seen lately out of the executive branch, be it in Richmond or be it in the White House, where the Constitution is ignored in favor of I want to do business this way, and to heck with the Constitution. And that's a trivial document that, it appears to me that the executive officers in both Richmond now and D.C., it's a trivial document, and it gets in the way. If it gets in my way, I'm just going to go around it or end around. And it's my belief that she won't be reconfirmed in the next General Assembly session, and at best it'll be an interim appointment. But I think if it was challenged, her appointment today, and the fact that we were in session, that she would be taken off the bench in a ruling by a court. So, I don't know if it's to build controversy. I don't know what the governor's motivations is. It'd be a great question to ask him.
Well, you would think that he would just get a handful of the Republican leaders in a room and figure out, who you guys want to nominate for the Supreme Court justice, and instead of going through the charade, because as you said, it's very possible that Judge Roush could make a ruling or be part of a ruling that then somebody could come back and say, well, that whole decision needs to be vacated because she was not really legitimately serving because the Senate was still in session, and you can't put somebody as an interim appointment when the Senate's in session. So it's like
absolutely, and I think right. You struck it on the button. It basically brings into question any Supreme Court decision that's rendered between now and the time there's another judge put up. You've hit one of the nails on the head, and this is the first governor I can ever remember that did not confer with leadership in the House and the Senate when making what we refer to as an interim appointment. In other words, a judge vacancy occurs while we're not in session. And this is the first time I can remember, and that includes Democrat governors and Republican governors. That includes Democrat-controlled General Assemblies and Republican-controlled General Assemblies and mixed control of General Assemblies. And this lack of conference, I'm the governor, I can do what I want type attitude is I don't think counterproductive, and certainly, and somehow, and this is what disturbs me very much, as I see coming more and more of folks in Richmond, certain folks in Richmond, trying to make Richmond turn into Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And that is not in the best interest of the people of Virginia. And let's not forget what we're about. We're not about Democrats and we're not about Republicans. We're about what's in the best interest of the people of Virginia. And to throw a Supreme Court into this kind of confusion where any decision they render between now and the time that the General Assembly elects a Supreme Court justice basically neuters that. Now, in anybody's book, I don't care who you are, in anybody's book, how is that in the best interest of Virginians as a whole? And I think any normal thinking person can say it's not in the best interest of Virginians. And, we're not here to, represent Republicans. We're not here to represent Democrats. We're here to represent the common good of the people of Virginia. And it just boggles my mind that these kind of decisions are being rendered.
Get to Dominion power. You negotiated this big deal. It's got a lot of criticism from some, accolades from other. Now we find out, though, that just the other day that Dominion Power may have overcharged again, and they owe consumers millions of dollars back. I mean, do you think now that the deal that you negotiated is still the right thing to do? The fact that they're not going to have an audit for a period of time.
Well, the paper likes to do a premature, report. Dominion did this. Now, the team that negotiates on behalf of the State Corporation Commission came and said, this is the amount of money. Dominion submitted theirs. They said, no, it's $66 million over. The Attorney General's office said, no, it's only $11 million over, okay? And so it's kind of like a court. One side takes one position, the other side takes the other position, and the three judges that are in charge of the State Corporation Commission rendered the final decision. So basically what you've seen is the plaintiff's case and the defendant's case, okay, prior to going to trial. And the trial, and in this case it's called a rate case, goes on, okay? But I think in the reality of the whole picture, one needs to look at it. And don't get me wrong, $66 million or $11 million that the Attorney General says, ought to be refunded back to customers, equates down to pennies on your bill. In the case of if it's $66 million, it'd be $1 a month off your bill. Okay, that's the case. And look, okay, it could be $1 back in the future. There have been years where they've undercharged and it's gone the other way, and they were allowed to recoup. Okay, it's gone both ways, and it's a standard thing that's done every 2 years. What my bill does, and I want to take you back a little bit and talk a little bit, because this is not a subject that can be discussed in sound bites or in a few short seconds. What my bill does is lock those base rates in, which are the lowest rates in the Mid-Atlantic region and way below the national average in terms of that, locks it in for a period of 5 years. The 5-year period is the interim period while the new clean power plan, which the initial power plan that was put out last summer by EPA, our own state corporation commission estimated rates going up 20%. Now, think of your average power bill. Now we're talking about money. Now, you have to go back and look at the Mercury rules. If you follow the Supreme Court decision that just came out here just a few months ago, filed 5 years ago, basically said that the Mercury power plan did not take into account what the cost to the utilities and ultimately the cost to the ratepayers were, and they null and voided and sent it back, for review. Unfortunately, everybody had already implemented all of those rules, and so the ratepayers are already picking up the cost for it. The attempt of my bill is to say, okay, we watched what happened with that one. Now here's another set of regulations. We don't want the ratepayers subject to these huge increases, so we're not going to shutter any coal plants for 5 years, which 4 out of 5 coal plants would have to be shuttered under the new set of EPA regulations. These plants would have to be shuttered well before their life expectancy is up. By shuttering them, you have what they call stranded costs. In other words, the amortized costs of those plants would collapse back onto your bill immediately or spaced over a relatively short period of time. That's estimated to be $2 billion. You're talking maybe $50 million or $12 million or $11 million. You're talking about $2 billion in stranded costs, and then you're talking about another $4 to $5 billion to replace those coal plants with new plants. All of that would have to be borne by the ratepayer, and it would result in these huge increases in your power bill. So what we're saying is stop it. Let's freeze the rates, okay? Let's lock in these low rates, okay? Let's freeze these rates while this case winds through the Supreme Court and do that. But I will say this, John, not one article in any newspaper reported who stood up when that bill was heard in front of committee and said, I supported the bill. The NAACP got up in front of the committee and said, we support the bill. The American Red Cross, who has to help out folks with their, losing heat and doing all those things, the American Red Cross got up and said, we support the bill. Several senior citizens groups who represent those senior citizens on fixed incomes got up and said, we support the bill. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the businesses that pay these large electric bills, got up and said, we support the bill. The Virginia Manufacturers Association, who pays the huge electric bills, got up and said, we support the bill. And the largest single purchaser of electricity, who takes electricity and melts steel and recycles steel. I mean, you want to talk about a huge consumer of electricity. The largest single user in Virginia said, we support the bill. So, I mean,
Okay.
If the paper reported those things, I think the readers would probably have a different view on it. So this is a negotiation that may well result in no rate increase. We have to wait to hear what the judges have to say.
Senator, we're out of time. We want to thank State Senator Frank Wagner for being with us. You can get more information. Go to for Frank, just Google Frank Wagner. It's all going to be right there. Senator, we appreciate your taking the time with us today, and we'll see you down the campaign trail. Thank you so much.